My name's Sam. I'm the Partnerships and Communications Manager here at Fairygodboss. Fairygodboss is the largest career community for women, and our mission is to improve the workplace by increasing transparency. We do this by offering a ton of really great free resources like anonymous company reviews, job listings, articles, virtual recruiting events, and so much more to help women succeed throughout their careers. So we will be taking some questions at the end of today's webinar. Feel free to leave them in the Q&A feature. You can leave questions with your username or anonymously, so don't be afraid to ask anything that comes to mind, and I'll make a reminder at the end as well. And you can chat with other people in the chat function. I see a lot of you have already found it, but make sure your messages are going to all panelists and attendees so other people can see what you're saying as well. Finally, we will be recording today's session and sending it out in a follow-up email later today. So if you miss anything, want to rewatch it, or share it with a friend, you'll have the ability to do so. Here with me today is Lynn. Lynn founded Bespoke Professional to empower women to land their next growth role at a market value salary. And she's known for empowering job seekers to make decisions that work best for them, for giving actionable next steps, explanations behind any recommendations. Thanks so much for being here today, Lynn. Over to you.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here. It's my second time doing a webinar with Fairygodboss, and it's always such a great audience. So I'm looking forward to hearing all of your guys' questions. As Sam said, I am a job search strategist. So what I do is I help women that are in the thick of their job search right now. I do work with men too, but I say women because it's usually about 85% women. And it's really exciting to help people with this because this is something that it's really important right now. And I want to get into why there are so many questions and that type of thing. So let's talk about what we're going to go over today. So a little bit shortened version of what you guys have seen, how to best use social networking platforms. We're going to specifically talk about how to reach out to other people most effectively. And then we'll talk about how to network more authentically and increase your odds of a referral. Those things are really going to go together, and we're going to talk about how do we engage with other people in a way that doesn't feel gross, and how to stay true to ourselves and really kind of take this transactional aspect out of it. So before we get into that, I want to tell you guys a little bit about myself and really tell a personal story. So the thing is, I always say that I founded this business because as a hiring manager, I got really frustrated with the hiring process. And that's absolutely true. I hired about 8 people within a year, and I just saw that there were so many things happening that made it really difficult on the hiring end to find the best candidates and to find diverse thinkers and make a team that was really going to complement one another. But honestly, there's been a few very personal things that have happened that have really shaped the fact that I started this business and the way that I engage. And I think you'll see that personality and that kind of influence come out today. So the thing about looking for a job, and this is the experience I had, was I was at what felt like the height of my career. I had made this pivot from being a high school teacher into tech, which felt like I felt invincible for a while. And I just kept going up and up, and I became a hiring manager, and I hit that 6-figure level, which is something that seemed like it was not, to do it in 3 or 4 years felt crazy after being a high school teacher. And the thing is that at kind of the height of it, it really started to fall apart. And what happened to me is a boss told me during a one-on-one that I was getting a reputation as too ambitious. And what I didn't realize happened at the time was that hit my shame triggers. So if there's anyone out there who reads Brené Brown, you'll know what I'm talking about. And that really set me on a path for the next 2-3 years. I think this was about 3 years ago, to do a lot of soul searching and understand why, yes, of course, having a boss that said that was really difficult. And I think that would be difficult for anyone, and the way that it was delivered and things like that. However, it really did send me on a path of soul searching. But before that happened, I was going out looking for a new job when I felt my worst. And I remember being at a networking event that was sponsored by an organization I wanted to look for. And I remember the night going pretty well, and then someone asking me a question, and I felt like that what was happening to me personally was affecting my ability to engage and kind of perform. And so what I found is that we are often looking for a job when we feel our worst. Especially for women, it often comes with a life transition, whether it is marriage, divorce, moving to another place, whether it's because you want to or because you're following a partner. We don't follow, right? We go with a partner. All those things. And so life can be really complicated, and throwing in a new job, often that just happens at the same time. And I think it's really important to approach the job search that way. So I'm going to make sure we talk a little bit about the elements that are really, really important to this, that are just going to be part of your life, and how this is going to, I don't want to ignore that, because if I did, this is a lot of the work, and this is what I find that my clients are talking about. So what do I mean by this? After my last Fairygodboss webinar, the question that I kept hearing from people who are reaching out to me personally was, why am I not getting any interviews? So it was just the same question over and over again, in terms of, you know, you've been there, right? I know some of you are sitting at home right now, and it's so isolating. You send off a ton of applications, and then you kind of sit there and wait. And then you might get the occasional callback, or you might get the occasional email, but often it's a whole lot of nothing. And so this is the question that I get over and over again. And the thing about it is, people often think I'm not qualified, or there's something wrong with me. It's not that. It's not that at all. It's happening to everyone, and applying online, basically what it comes down to is that the system is broken. And I do want to tell one more story here, because the idea of this, when I started this, yes, as a hiring manager, I sensed this tension. And I knew I didn't, you know, when you start something, you start to go out into the world and you say, there's something that needs to happen here. And so I started giving some speeches, and I started working with some clients, but I targeted a very specific population of people that were all new to my area. And within such a short amount of time, I realized how many people were confused and how opaque the process was. And I can tell you the exact client who made me realize it, because I remember vividly us meeting and us sitting down for coffee and thinking, this woman seems way too successful and way too put together. She'll never hire me. And she did. And it was such an effective collaboration. And what I've learned from this is, and the reason I tell my own story is because that's the idea, is we feel like we're the only ones, first of all, but also we often feel like there's weakness in reaching out for help or admitting that we're struggling. And here's what I want you guys to know. It is not just you. There are so many successful people. I've worked with people with Ivy League degrees who've worked at Ivy League universities. I've worked with people who are the most impressive people working for the most impressive companies, and they are struggling right now because the hiring process is broken. So that is really important to get that out of the way, because if you feel like there's something wrong with you, and I know that that is something that we struggle with, and that is something that when you don't realize that it's happening to everyone, it's a lot harder to figure out how to move forward. So that's really important to me that we get that out of the way. So just to make this clear, a lot of people think I'm applying to the wrong jobs, I'm not qualified enough, I need to go back to school. I just want to be clear, for the vast majority of people, this isn't the problem. There is a job out there that you are qualified for in a lot, right? There are obviously going to be exceptions, but most people that I've come into contact with in terms of Fairygodboss and the people I've worked with, the hiring process is very broken. And we know this based on the statistics. I think LinkedIn put out a study that said hiring managers hire something like 60% of the people that they end up hiring are from their own network. Hiring managers are circumventing this. This is what I saw, because the application process is so broken. And another thing to keep in mind about this is, after doing this for a year and realizing what kind of people were coming in, talking to me, and that it was all sorts of people needing help with the job search process, it kind of hit me like a light bulb. And then I went to a conference and I had the opportunity to hear a woman speak who actually works with companies to improve their hiring process and de-bias their hiring process. And she has a background in neuroscience. And what she said is that the hiring process has not changed since the 70s. We are writing job descriptions the exact same way, and we're taking candidates the exact same way. However, if you think about the landscape and how that's changed, what the average job seeker wants right now is they want change, upward mobility, and growth. What that means is we are going out there looking for a job that's going to give us that new skill set that is going to help us grow. And we're changing jobs much more frequently than we used to. However, the job description is still written as if someone has 5 years of experience. The problem is the person with 5 years of experience doesn't want that job. So that's the tension that we're feeling right now. And that's why I say that the process is broken, because we really do have two sides working against each other. So I hope that that is not a gloom and doom message, but a hopeful message. And in a lot of ways, that's great, because this gives us a platform today to say, what are we going to do about it? What are our best ways that we can circumvent the system? So the first thing, that we have a very short amount of time together. So I want to get out of the way, what are the things that you need to do to prepare in order to get out there and to really effectively job seek? The first one is reviewing your strengths. Now, both of these things are things I spent a lot of time with my clients on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to email everybody with exercises that go through how to hit these 2 points of preparation. So the first one, review your strengths. There's a specific thing that I work on with my clients. And we talk about going through the moments that have made you really proud and thinking about the times that you felt really good about your work. And again, I'm going to send you some exercises on this. This really helps you remember, these are the things that I have done. These are the things I enjoy. And this is where I've made an impact. And that is really important in order to start thinking that way going into your job search, especially if you're in a situation like I was, where you're not really feeling your best right now. And you're going into this trying to market yourself when you might be feeling a little bit, I don't want to say less confident, but I think that's how the words that we use to perceive how we're feeling. The second one is aligning yourself to target roles. So often you hear people say that they tailor their resume to every job they apply to. While that makes a lot of sense, it's difficult right now considering that you need to have alignment between your LinkedIn profile and your resume. And so what I recommend that people do is take 3 key job type roles that you're interested in and really spend time looking at the job descriptions and taking an inventory of what you've done compared to not only what's required on those job descriptions, but what it says would be the everyday duties of that job. And again, with that one as well, I'm going to send you an exercise that you can do on your own to help align you to these target roles, because both of these things help you understand, yes, I'm qualified. Here's the jobs I'm going to go after. And it makes it so that you're able to market your LinkedIn profile and resume toward some different jobs, even if those jobs vary a little bit in what they're asking for. So definitely check your email for more info. I think that that'll come out in, I want to say like 6 or 7 hours from now, but check your email to make sure to get those exercises. And I'm also going to give an opportunity for you guys, if you do those exercises and have questions, I'm going to tell you at the end where you can send those questions to get them answered. So the thing we're going to talk about a lot today is when we think about how to get a referral and how to make networking more comfortable and effective, we first have to talk about what type of networking doesn't work or why a lot of people will hit walls in their networking. So there's 2 things we think of when we think of networking. The first one is we think of going to somewhere where we're meeting all these new people. And I have had clients go to events and meet people and have that be really successful, but that's not what we're going to focus on today, because I think that there are things you can do that are going to be even more effective for you and really give you a lot more bang for your buck, if you will. But when it comes to job search networking, typically what people will think of is they will think of, okay, they'll say, I found this job online, or I want to work for this company. And so I'm going to look up someone who works there, and I'm going to reach out to them on LinkedIn or reach out to them in Fairygodboss, and I'm going to ask them to refer me into the company. So what is the problem with this? If you think about it, this is incredibly transactional because this is totally cold. You're doing essentially the same thing as cold calling someone in sales, right? We know what the problem is with that. When someone gets a message, well, I do think that in theory, they'll see that and often people will want to help you. Their lives are very complex, right? Just like yours, they have their jobs, their families, their kids, their partners, trying to stay healthy, trying to keep up with their own career. So someone that they don't know is usually going to fall on the bottom of their list in terms of their priorities. So even if they want to help, it's probably going to make it to their way to their to-do list and live at the bottom until it falls off. So what we're going to do is talk about how do we get around that and what are some techniques that work better in terms of getting in touch with people and how do we actually expand our network to the people that we want. So the first thing I want you to think about is always having a conversation. I can think of an example where a client of mine, as she was talking to different people, someone would say, well, I'll just refer you into my company. And the problem and this isn't one of those things where you think, oh, a referral, that's amazing. But in this case, he worked at a very large company and one that I'm sure there's a lot of referrals that go into. It's a tech company, it's public. And he was referring to her to a team that he didn't know the people who worked on it. So it kind of sounded like he wanted to check the boxes and send in the information and not necessarily actually give her a recommendation, just kind of put the referral in. And so we talked about, well, what would it be like if you sat down with him, or in her case, she realized that that was a little bit of a dead end. She said, great, I'm going to have him refer me. And in the meantime, she knew someone else who worked there. And she said, okay, I'm going to sit down with this person, right? This was our plan. And you talk to the person about yourself, what you're good at. You talk to them about what you're interested in, and you ask them questions about what the company culture is like. And from there, after having a conversation, it is much easier for that person to, email someone from that team and say, hey, I talked to someone that I think would be a great asset to our company. Would you have a phone conversation with her? Would you meet with her and do an informational interview? That is the primary goal here. And you know what? If nothing else, if that friend is putting in that referral the same way that the other guy was, at least she's able to say, this is someone that I've talked to. This is someone that I understand how they fit in the company. And that recommendation is going to be a lot stronger. So really what your goal is to have conversations with people and make connections with them, not just to send cold emails to people you don't know. Because even if, let's say best case scenario, that person does refer you, if they don't know you well, that's going to read when they submit their materials. And if they can't really say anything positive about you, that is going to affect your ability to get a job there. So I want to dig into this even deeper. So what is it that you're going to do? Often when the kind of things I'm talking about really best start with leveraging your own network. And what I find funny is online, I'll notice there was kind of an almost argument happening with people where someone said, networking is how you should get your job. And someone says, no, I wouldn't recommend that. I would say to leverage your network. And I want to bring back the word networking as a positive thing, because leveraging your network and networking are one and the same. The idea behind having a network is expanding it and leveraging the people that you already know in order to do that is a big part of it. So I want to kind of expand the use of the word and not villainize that. So what we're going to do, we're going to go through this a little more in depth, but I kind of wanted to give you the key highlights here. You're actually going to start with the people that are closest to you. And that's really the way that you get around this whole, I'm going to pluck someone out of the thin air, and that's the person I'm going to contact. We're going to start with people that are most likely to help you, which are people that you often know the best. And then with them, you want to have conversations, and then you want to have them introduce you to more people. And the key to this is that those other people might not actually be a hiring manager. So this might be a little counterintuitive. So I want to give you a visual for this. So this is kind of the big idea. We're drilling down a little bit farther. Next, we're going to talk about how do I actually execute this, right? So I want to give you a visual. So on your screen, looks kind of funny, right? This reminds me, and I think this is a good analogy of the memory game that I used to play. So if I have other children of the 80s out here, maybe you guys have played this game too. So when you're playing memory, you know that you're trying to find a match, right? You're trying to find two things and you have to flip over the cards one by one, essentially. And what you're looking for is a match. Now, I want you to imagine that you're doing the exact same thing, only your job is somewhere in these 25 cards. And I choose 25 for the sake of simplicity, but each of these 25 cards in front of you represent a person. So your goal is really to have 25 conversations with people, 15, 30-minute conversations if you can get them, in which you can get to know people. You can tell them about the proud moments that I'm going to have you talk about and write about and think about. And you can express to them, this is what I'm interested in. These types of experiences that I've had. Because if you make that meaningful connection, it's a lot easier to get an introduction. Now, the reason that this is effective, and let's talk about how this goes. So the first line is the people that you know. Often we don't think about how these people can help us because we think, okay, everyone in my immediate network works in, let's say you're trying to make a pivot. When I was a teacher, a little bit different for me because I moved, but I could make that same argument. If I'm new somewhere, how do I leverage the people that I know? And what if the people that I know in my small network don't work in the field I want to work in? The other thing about that I wanted to mention, so backing up a little bit, is the people that know you the best may or may not be in your field, but also don't discount colleagues, former managers. That is the way that I've gotten most of my jobs. It's actually usually former colleagues, not necessarily someone who has hiring power, but someone who has been successful at a company. So the reason we want to start with people we know is these are the people that care about our success the most. So it could be, yes, a former boss would be amazing. A former colleague would be amazing. But honestly, it can be your best friend who works in a totally different industry, and it can be your partner. And I know that sounds crazy, but think about this idea. It's taking some time out of your schedule, no distractions, to have a meaningful conversation and say, this is the type of job that I'm looking for, and these types of things I want to do. But really at this point, I just want to expand my network. And I'm going to I taught this to one of my clients, this exact visual, and she came up with a line for the ask. So of course, when you ask people and you say, I'm looking for this type of job, a lot of times they're going to offer their help. And what I've always said is ask for people's advice. So start there. Say, I'm looking for a job and I'm new to this area, or I'm looking to make a pivot, or whatever. I'm taking the situations I think are the most challenging and say, if you were me, what would you do? Because that lowers people's boundaries in terms of their barriers. They don't feel as much pressure and they're free to think out loud. So when they're thinking out loud, you're going to find they're often going to say, you know what? I do know someone who works at this company and their company is hiring, and they will often offer that. Now, what can happen, and the advice thing makes this easier, but what can happen is that they're in the same mentality that you are, that they think the only thing that's helpful to you is to introduce you to a hiring manager. So here's the way that you're going to get around this. Your goal is not necessarily to meet a hiring manager. Your goal is to get an introduction to someone else, right? Someone else who really could be anyone, often in your geographical area, and who is employed full-time is a great way to go, but not necessarily, right? It could be someone who is a business owner. So the goal is for that first 5 meetings you have with people that you know to introduce you to 5 more people. And so here's the line that my client used as I taught her this, that she has found to be really effective. And then I shared it with some of my other clients. And she'd say to people, and she's looking to make a geographical move. So she has some challenges in terms of in the place she's moving to, she doesn't know very many people. And so the people she is talking to, she says, I'm really looking to expand my network in New York. That's not the place she's moving, but if it were New York, you know what? I would love to meet people, whether it's professional or personal. And so she's saying, introduce me to someone that will help me expand my network. And when she says professional or personal, what it means is that person, you can introduce them to me because they remind me of you, because you think we share the same values, because we're into the same sports team, whatever it is. But I would appreciate an introduction to anyone. And that takes you to the next person, because what you're able to do here is you're now able to turn 5 meetings into 25 meetings. And I'll say sometimes with my clients, their job, they'll start to have some luck with this, but they'll end up expanding and they'll end up doing more like 49 meetings. It sounds like a lot and it sounds like a big time investment. But let's go back to the analogy of why the other type of just reaching out cold doesn't work and why this does work. If you're probably familiar with this, and you might feel like this is hitting a little too close to the head if you have any sales experience, because when you reach out to people, in theory, when I cold call people, it should work, right? Because that person, bought something very similar to what I'm trying to sell, or they might need it, or they're my exact target market. But the problem isn't that they aren't willing to buy what I'm selling them. The problem is that they don't want to take my phone call. The same thing happens here. I know a lot of companies that give their salespeople 9 months, sometimes over a year to ramp up. And they know it's because they're doing this sort of thing. They're out there getting to know people. They're out there making connections and building relationships and trying to learn the problems of their customer. And this is the same idea that, yes, it might seem like it's harder because you're sitting and talking with people who don't necessarily have hiring power, but you're basically creating a small army of people who, when they see a job opening, when something comes their way, you have won them over because you've taken the time to tell them about what you're passionate about and what you want to do. And then they know you and they're able to refer you. And the key is, if you've ever read the book Give and Take by Adam Grant, most people get their job through their weaker connections, not their stronger connections. And when you think about that, it's because there are just so many more weaker connections, but you're very, very likely to have someone they know a lot of people. So if you can tap into every person that you know's network and the people that they know, that's going to create a much larger web of people that are out there helping you, thinking of you when opportunities come their way. It's a very different situation than just applying online. And I want to revisit this because that is the idea behind this webinar. I have found, and I would be really curious, maybe during Q&A, Sam has some stats on this, I'm not sure, but anecdotally, again, I don't have any statistics on this, I find that my clients, even when they're 100% qualified, when they meet something ridiculous, like 100% of the qualifications for a job, which honestly, I tell my clients to apply for stuff when they meet 60% of the qualifications in most cases, little note to you. No matter how qualified they are or how in demand their field is, they're only getting a first reach out, so even an email, from 10% of the things they're applying to online if they're not using any of the networking strategies. So that is to say that it's just not an effective strategy. And I mean, this expands to a friend of mine who knows how to code full stack, studied all that stuff, and you'd think that that person could just apply online cold, and that didn't work for her either. So it's not just for those of us that are in the more soft skill side things. It also applies to people who have very demand skills, because hiring managers are looking to their network for this sort of thing. So the other thing I do want to mention is when I say meetings, I mean a conversation. So often when you do reach out saying, if someone can meet you in person, I think that's great. I often say to people, if I reach out, or if I advise my clients when they reach out, to say something like, would you be willing to get on a 15-minute phone call with me? If you're the type of person who wants to meet face-to-face, I'm really down for that. And you'll find some people will take you up on that, or say, going to people's office. Going to people's office makes it super, super easy for them. So things like that really take people's guard down, and it helps them, because if they do have a really busy life, if they're a super connector, which is the type of people you want to get connected to, often they're going to have a lot going on. And starting with a phone call is a really easy way for them to sort of say, oh, this person isn't expecting a lot of me. It's easy for me to meet this. So keep in mind that networking can look just as much like this as it can sitting and having a cup of coffee with someone. You'll see online people dread the coffee sometimes. So starting with phone can kind of help that if you're interacting with those types of people. Okay, so here is a little bit of a review, but I also kind of want to get into this idea about when I am reaching out. So let's talk about, not a review, but let's pivot a little bit and say, what if I'm doing all this other stuff? And I think that's great. I think that represents a big, like I say, 1/3 of the time you're spending should be in investing in these meetings and just having these 25 meetings, getting the word out about who you are. But it's often you find yourself with 30 minutes here one day and 20 minutes the next day. It's like, I'm waiting for people to get back to me on meetings. What can I do in the meantime? So we have these tremendous assets like Fairygodboss. From spending a lot of time on the Fairygodboss website recently, I would say I think people are underutilizing it and what it could really be used for. And of course, I talk to my clients a lot about LinkedIn. I have heard, and again, Sam might know more than this than I do, but I believe that women and men on Fairygodboss are going to be more receptive to you contacting them and reaching out and utilizing that network, because that's what we're here for. We're here to help each other. So when you reach out to people, whether it's on Fairygodboss or LinkedIn, how can you do this effectively? So let's say that I do want to reach out to someone cold. If I find this great job online and I want to apply, it makes sense for me to apply. It makes sense for me to do that, even if none of the meetings have led me toward that particular company or position. So often the idea here is going to be kind of the same idea in investing over time. If you want to reach out to someone who say, man, I'd really like to work at that company, and I noticed that this person at Fairygodboss works there. What you're going to want to do is you want to reach out to the person and we want to make a genuine connection. So I want you to think about, we kind of have all lost our heads in terms of online networking, and it makes sense because I would say that I knew nothing about this or never really thought about this until I started this business. So think about when you're in person, and if you were at an in-person event and you heard that someone worked at the company you wanted to work at, and then you approach that person. If you were doing it in person, you wouldn't go up to that person and say, oh my gosh, you work at Rover, I want to work there. Can you refer me? You would never do that, right? Yet that's what we do when we contact people online. We go straight in for the kill, and it's weird and it's a little bit off-putting, right? You're like, I don't know you. Again, even if I want to help you, that's not going to fall top of my priorities. So you want to use these platforms to get to know people and start by asking questions, right? The first thing that I like to do, and I can give you some concrete examples of this, is what does that person care about? What are they putting out there? For example, there was a woman that I had met for 2 seconds at an event, and I noticed that she was putting up events. She was advertising for nonprofit events that they were doing, and they were really cool organizations. And so I would often repost and say, oh, this is a, diversity event that looks really cool. You guys should go to it. Things obviously I really believed in. And then what was interesting is I was writing an article for a magazine about the pay inequality. And I felt it was really important for me to include some viewpoints of some women of color. And so I reached out to her, and she agreed to have a phone conversation with me right away. And, maybe she would have agreed to do that from the beginning, but I know she was extremely busy at the time. And it was like, I had already helped her. I had already taken an interest in what was important to her. And the thing about it is I did that before asking for something. It's okay, I think, for us to give to people and then ask. I think that's really important. I would even say, there's a quote, and I believe this is from How to Win Friends and Influence People. If you don't know that book, it's kind of old school, but it has some relevant stuff in it. And it says, the best way to make a friend is to do something nice for someone else. But the second best way to make a friend is to let someone else do something nice for you. And it is to say, when we come in and we ask first, it's a little bit weird. It's also weird if it's like, I'll do this for you if you do this for me. That's where things feel transactional, feel quid pro quo. If you're going out and you're looking for ways to help people or take a genuine interest in people first, notice that what that means is I didn't require anything of you. I didn't require you to do something for me in order to do that. And if you think this only works when people are in need of something, I'll give you another example. There was a company that I'm super interested in because they do interviewing for people. And I'm a big fan of what they do. And I wanted to get kind of get in touch with some people who work there and really just learn from what they were doing. And I noticed they were very active on LinkedIn. So I was posting things. I started reposting. They had an art, it was a video with, I want to say someone from Uber, a bigger company, talking about how they interviewed or what types of recommendations for job seekers to follow, candidates to follow when they go through interviews. And I reposted it. And I don't know if it was the only thing I reposted, but several people to that company actually requested to make a connection with me on LinkedIn instead of the other way around. So I think everyone out there is looking to advance their careers, advance the message of their company, whatever it is. And there's ways we can help do that. It works best, obviously, if someone's active on a platform. So you have people on LinkedIn who aren't necessarily active. But the nice thing is, if you look at the Fairygodboss platform, a lot of people are on there because they're active, not because they have to be. So you could take that same interest. If someone posts an article or someone asks for advice, engaging with those types of people and responding to comments and then reaching out to people and saying, hey, I read your message. I think that was really interesting. Or I noticed you're in this field. A lot of times the people who are pivoting out of one field might be pivoting out of the field that you're looking to pivot into. Just because there's other people out there who need help doesn't mean that they're not going to be really good at helping you. So I think if I were to guess, the biggest objection I would hear from people, or the biggest fear you're going to have about this, is how much time it takes. Yes, it takes time. And I want you to think back of, if you were a salesperson, would the thing you would do just directly cold call everybody that you thought would buy your thing? Probably not. So taking the time to get to know someone, and worst case scenario, I know, like I mentioned, on LinkedIn, not everyone's active. So I have had clients reach out when they look up and they say, this person doesn't post ever. I can't really tell what's important to them. We didn't go to the same school. I can't really make a connection. I might as well just go in and ask for the LinkedIn connection. And I think at that point, it makes sense to do it, right? But there's things that you can do, like send that person an article you think would be interesting. And if and when you're ready to make an ask, the ask shouldn't be, I just met you online, can you refer me? The ask should be something about you coming from a place of learning. So when you do make the ask, after you've offered something, after you've given something, after you've made that connection, the ask should really be, you know what? I would love to learn more about your company. I've been reading about the culture, but I would really like to hear from someone about the cultural fit. Is that something you could tell me about? And if they respond, then maybe you can ask for a phone call, but even giving them the opportunity to answer that question via Messenger or via email, you're coming at it saying, I want to understand if I'm a good fit for the company. I want to understand more about the company. You're not coming in saying, will you please refer me? And that is a different situation. You want to try to build those connections with people. And if there's any doubt in your mind that this works, and I like to tell my own personal stories because I'm not always there and I don't know, exactly what messages my clients are sending. But I noticed in a group that I was in on LinkedIn that whenever someone asked for advice, people would immediately jump in. But when someone would post an article that they'd written and they clearly were looking for feedback or help, or just to spread the word, maybe they're new to it, no one would comment. And so I noticed there was a recent article that looked really interesting, and I clicked into the article that was written on LinkedIn and I commented on the bottom of it. And I started a really interesting conversation with this guy who'd written it. And you guys, it sounds like it took a while. This all happened in a matter of, I think my time investment in this was like 20 minutes. And I think this all happened in the course of a day or two. And he ended up inviting, I want to say, over a dozen people to one of my online events. And most of them bought tickets and came. So it was really remarkable to see how that quick connection I just made. He invited all those people. And then he said, hey, I'm thinking of starting a business like yours. Would you talk to me? I'm like, absolutely. So that was a really easy exchange. So I'm really emphasizing this point because it sounds like something that can take a long time, but you can look first to see, what can I offer? How can I get to know this person? But really, if there's not a lot there, you can still send the connection request and you can still kind of say, could I ask you about your company you work at? Could I get some information? That's going to stand out from the other messages they're getting as I'm not just looking for you to help me. I'm actually interested in finding out what you guys are looking for as a company. So that is the way that you want to get to know people online. Okay, so that is what I have for you guys today. I'm always really excited to do Q&A because Sam serves up some great questions. So let's get to those. If you guys have questions right now, you can put them in the chat. Sam, I'll turn it back to you.
Hey, Lynn, thank you so much. That was a really great presentation. We already had a few questions come in throughout, but I want to let everybody know, go to the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to leave any questions. We'll get to as many as possible. And while we have some more kind of building up, I just want to do a really quick plug here. Fairygodboss just launched new professional profiles. So you can upload your resume, and coming very, very soon, I don't want to give it away just yet, but coming very soon, you'll be able to apply for jobs with top companies in the click of a button. Yes, we're making your lives way easier. These companies are actively looking to hire more women. And after you apply for the job exclusively on Fairygodboss, you'll be able to directly message the recruiters. So you can take all these amazing tips that Lynn gave us today and talk directly with the people who are looking to hire you. It's really great. It's an awesome feature. I'll be including more information in the follow-up email that goes out later today. So you'll be able to upload your resume directly there, read all about the amazing new features that come with professional profiles. I don't want to talk all your ears off. But be on the lookout for that. All right, so we had a few questions come in here. Let's start with the first one. Do companies really offer information interviews? And when they don't even have open positions for that person? So are those a real thing? Are those kind of bogus? Are they a waste of time? How do they work?
Yes, I really like this question because this gets to the heart of the matter. Do companies offer them? I would say as a rule of thumb, no, companies don't offer them. The key is that often you can get an informational interview with an individual. So that is the key, is you're kind of doing this thing where you're circumventing the system. And so it's not that you're looking for an informational necessary with the hiring manager. Often it would be someone who would be your equivalent, someone who would be your colleague. So I'll give you an example. When I worked on a training team and I held different positions in that team up to the manager, if often someone in my company would come to me and say, my significant other, and often it was their significant other, I want to emphasize that point, is currently a teacher, they're looking to get into a different field, like get into the corporate world, would you do an informational interview with them? And I always said, absolutely, if they can either come here or get on the phone with me, right? Super busy. And the thing about that is, why did I do that? As someone who'd made a pivot from teaching into tech, that was something, it kind of reinforces my life view when I help other people do the same thing. That's kind of the bias working in our favor. People often want to help people that remind them of themselves. So if you notice that you would like to make a certain type of pivot and someone else works at a company who have made that same sort of pivot, that's often a good person to ask to do an informational interview. But the other thing I want to point out here is when someone's significant other was coming to ask me, and often I think in one of the cases, I barely knew the person who came to ask me. He worked at my company, but I didn't know him. But I thought it was really endearing. And he came physically over to find me and, out of how many floors of people. And so that's the situation where I'm likely to say yes to that. The other thing I want to point out, and I'm really glad this question came up, is many companies, if they're growing, if they're in tech, whatever the issue is, because they recognize that their recruiters can only do so much and they're often inundated with the applications incoming, they will incentivize their employees to help refer. And so what happens is, for example, at the company I worked at, we would get a $3,000 bonus if someone was hired and stayed for 90 days who we referred. And that's if the person was not a developer. So that was the baseline. And what that told me as an employee was the company doesn't mind if I take a 30-minute coffee break or a slightly longer lunch to help recruit someone that I think could be really good for this company, even if they're not in my exact space. So I really took that to heart and found that everyone in the company was doing that. So if you can find companies that are growing quickly, it's often going to be easier to get an informational interview with someone who works there, not because they necessarily care about the hiring bonus, but because the company has told them that is an effective use of your time to help recruit. So yes, go talk to individuals, and I'd often encourage you to look for someone who would be at your level, not necessarily a hiring manager. If you can talk to a hiring manager, that's great, but just know your goal is to get to know someone in the company and then kind of use that square methodology I told you from there to possibly get to talk to other people in the company who might be closer to what you're looking for.
Lynn literally hit every single point that we say here at Fairygodboss with that answer. That was perfect. I want to like post that into like a article or something. But yeah, informational interviews are just what Lynn said. They're to get information. Don't go into it expecting to land your job from that interview. You really just want to get to know the person. You want to ask questions. It's an informational interview. So awesome. Love that answer. An anonymous attendee asked the infamous question that we get every single time, and I think it's just so important for everybody to hear the answer to this. When you do apply into the black hole of an application, what's the best way to follow up, and how long should you wait until you do follow up?
The thing about this is how I go about it with my clients in terms of time investment is I don't necessarily recommend following up. It really depends. I guess it really depends. I want to edit that answer in the sense of when I'm applying to jobs, I tell my clients, don't spend more than a third of your time applying to things cold. I did get one of my jobs cold, but it was at the time the company was 180 people and almost no one had heard of it. So that's a time when it makes sense to apply cold. And I think you should always do it, but knowing that you're going to have to figure out a way to kind of network into that as well. And so I would kind of, in the spirit of this particular topic of today, I would say if you can talk to someone at the company a couple of days before you apply, I couldn't believe that people I had worked with at my old team, because I worked on a huge team when I worked at Microsoft, someone reached out to me and said, I have an interview tomorrow. Can you help me? And I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I was like, she had applied online, and had she reached out to me before she applied, I could have helped her network into it, figure out what the right, part of the organization was for her. And then I would have kind of been incentivized for my time by not doing that. And she applied cold. No one got a referral bonus from that. So I was like, well, man, I would have been happy. I'm going to help you anyway, but it would have been really nice to kind of work together on this. So I would say, reach out to someone who works at that company before you apply and see if you can find someone who would talk to you about what a good cultural fit means, and just say, hey, I'm going to apply in a couple days. Notice that when you tell someone you're going to apply, you're not saying, I need something from you. You're just saying, hey, I'm going to apply. Do you have any advice about what makes a good cultural fit? Or, do you have any advice about how to make sure that my application gets seen? From there, I will say, if it depends on how competitive it is, but often I find that reaching out to not necessarily and this is the theme of the day, right? Not to the recruiter or not to the hiring side. Often they're so inundated, they're working through the system. They're either looking at things based on keywords, based on those kind of ATS systems you hear about, or they're looking at everything, they've already looked at it, and you're kind of just flooding the system. But that being said, if you go and you talk to someone who, if you can, and I think Fairygodboss profiles will be an excellent way to do this, because if you have your professional profile up, and then Fairygodboss is going to set this up in a way for you that's going to be a lot better. So I think I would look to them as the experts to say, what are the rules of engagement here? So that might be different here. And maybe Sam, or as this feature comes out, I'd really watch for it. I think it's going to be really impactful. You see that platforms like Fairygodboss, other platforms that have this kind of feature, say that you're going to get more results from applying something like that. And I'm not saying that just because we're here. I'm saying that because I've seen the stats of other platforms that are women focused. And if they want more women, they're coming here because they're really trying to round out their teams and get more diversity of thought. But I would say if you're currently operating on something like LinkedIn, your best bet after applying is going to be reaching out to someone that's on your current team. That person can look at your profile. They may not respond, but if they look at your profile and they don't respond, it's likely because they don't think you're a good fit. There's not a lot you can do there, but you got it looked at, which is huge. And then this happened to me after I left my company, talking to my former colleagues, because what happened was they were really in need of someone else. And when someone who would be that person's colleague looked at the LinkedIn profile, they were shocked that it hadn't been seen. So they did push it through. So I think that the best way to do that when you're going to reach out after and even before is often to someone who would work on your team and really start to like get your profile in front of them and also talk to them about what their advice would be and what makes a good cultural fit. Like really start to make that connection. And if you tell them you're going to apply in 2 days and you don't hear from them, just go ahead and apply.
Yeah, I think a really underutilized resource as well is your alumni network. Look to that. A lot of people have alumni portals. So maybe in your LinkedIn, you don't have anybody, you know, at your dream company who is in your network. Go to your alumni portal, type in the company name. I know I've found people that way and just reach out to them. You know, I went to Boston University, so sometimes I'll just open up an email, hey, I'm a fellow Terrier, and that automatically will start a great conversation. The next question kind of relates to that as well. And I think I am going to draw on a few questions because we have a few different ones that all kind of go to the same theme. This question is, do you have any specific tips for new grads or young professionals that don't really have, you know, robust networks? And a similar question is people trying to pivot to a different industry. So you probably don't have a robust network in the field you're trying to get into. Do you have any tips for those people?
It's really interesting that you put these two questions together, Sam, and right after what you just said, because I was looking to do the impossible in theory. I was looking to move to a new regional area, which I'd been living abroad for 5 years. I was looking to pivot, which in retrospect is like, I wouldn't necessarily recommend trying to do all that at once. And what I ended up being able to do is, you know, I followed my own advice at that time as I sat down with someone who was actually working for me in my past business. And I said, wow, you got a job for HBO right out of school. And I knew that her degree was in Italian. So I was like, okay, she knows her networking, right? And I asked her what she did. And I think we spent hours together. And I remember the day evolving and everything. And then she said, you know what, why don't we type into Facebook people you know that live in Seattle? And so we did this, and the person that popped up, one person popped up, and she worked at Microsoft. And the thing about this is someone I went to college with and had not spoken to at the time in over 10 years. And I reached out to her and I asked her about several things. Like, I'm moving to Seattle. I need advice in general, what neighborhood to live in, and I don't really know where I'm going to work. Like, kind of threw that in there. That led to my job at Microsoft, which led to my career in tech. So I want to revisit this idea. If you're a new grad, I think that there's lots of people out there who are just chomping at the bit to help you. And I think what Sam is saying makes total sense of you should really tap into the alumni network. Those are people who I talked about earlier. Who are the people who want to help you, who remind you of themselves? That's going to be the people to talk to. And don't worry if they're not in your field, because we've just given you the whole kind of track for how to leverage that and ask for their advice. They have tons of advice. So I'd say if you're a new grad, you know, you have a lot of people that want to help you. You have a huge alumni network. And I think you have a bunch of people you can call on. And I think that's really, really effective. I'll tell you right now, like if that were me in that case and I worked at a company and someone reached out to me and they were a new grad, I would be so much more likely to help them. And it's not even just people who went to my school. I went to a really small private liberal arts college in the Midwest. And I have reached out to people and had people reach out to me just based on being in that same division of like, oh my gosh, that's crazy that we live in a major city right now, whatever. We don't even have to live in the same city, but the fact that we've gone to that type of school. As far as a pivoter, I think that it is even more important to just invest in your network, because you don't really know who's going to be able to help you yet. And your network, if you sit down with them and have those conversations, will be able to help you figure out who are the people you need to talk to. So I think that advice is similar. And obviously that's kind of how it worked for me, is the person I ended up contacting had made a similar pivot as well. So it worked out. But I would say if you're pivoting, a lot of, getting in your own head how your past experiences align to the new job. I think that the exercises I'm going to send out are going to be really key, because you may actually find that when you read through job descriptions, you meet a lot of the criteria, even if only adjacently. That's going to be for you to understand that, yes, I'm qualified, is also going to help you and help you kind of message those meetings as well.
Yeah, that's really great advice. Okay, another question that came through from an anonymous attendee and a few other people. I see Olga also asked this question. If I know several people from a company, does it make sense to ask out for, or to make the ask for several referrals, or should I just choose one person? And if I just pick one person, how do I know which person to pick?
Yeah, I really like this question a lot because it really does get to the heart of the matter. So, well, let's just say logistically, what happens if you like reach out to all of them and they're unaware of this? Well, you're going to create a problem because if you get the job, it's going to be really unclear who should get the bonus for it if there is one offered, and it'll probably go to the first person you reached out to. So if I were the second or third person and I took the time and I was not knowing of this, I would probably feel a little bit taken advantage of. So how do you deal with this? I think there are two ways you can go about this. One of them is, no matter what, start by reaching out personally to one of these people. But there are two, when I say there are two ways you can go about it, what I mean is there are two ways that you can choose. So one of the ways would be start with the person who's most affiliated with the organization, that you want to be in, the department you want to be in. The other one would be to reach out to the person that you know the best. My thought process is that you probably want to reach out to the person you know the best, but use your own, it really depends, right? So if you reach out to the person you know your best and you say, and I think it's worth asking, like, do you get a referral for this? I would love you to be compensated for your time. I would love your help. But at the same time, like, I know your time is valuable. And if you say to someone that you knew, and this, going back to this person I hadn't talked to in over 10 years, how willing she was to help me, the long email she would write me about what neighborhoods to live in or advice about the team that I was going to be on. Tell her, like, I'm just really interested in your company. It's on the top of my list. What do you recommend? Go back to the advice and see if you can have a 15-minute phone conversation. See what happens there. If that reaches a dead end, if you, and say to the person, this might seem really scary, but one of the best ways after you've had a conversation with someone who works at the company you want to work at, like a phone conversation or face-to-face, is saying, like, do you think that I'd be a good fit? Or it's better, and this is crazy because this is like a great interview question, to say, like, do you have any reservations about my fit with this company? Because that's a good way. If they say no, then that's a really good way for you to say, would you mind referring me? Because you kind of already asked them, like, you kind of already done your homework. And then find out if that first person's willing to refer you, see what happens with it, say, awesome, I appreciate that so much. Follow up with that person, send a thank you letter for meeting with, even if it's just a quick email. Thank yous are never too much. But what that also does is it puts kind of a to-do reminder in that person's inbox to go ahead and make the referral and then see what happens from there. Because if it reaches a dead end, then it totally makes sense for you to go to the next person and talk to the next person. Like what my client did that, right? Where he's like, oh, I'll just throw in a referral. But she can now go to someone and say, I've already been referred, but the person doesn't really know me that well. Or they haven't had a conversation about my skills recently. Would you sit down with me? And just making sure you're transparent with the first person and the second person. And with the second person, often they can probably check before they invest too much time to see if you've already been referred. And then that person becomes your asset as well. So go one by one and pick the person first that you think is most likely to help you.
Awesome. Okay, I think we have time for just one more question. We had a ton come through, so I'll include some details about Lynn where you can reach her on Fairygodboss and on her personal site. So if your question doesn't get answered right now, you can go talk to her, leave your question somewhere else so that it does get answered. But I know a lot of people have already applied to jobs and maybe they didn't do the outreach beforehand. So one of our anonymous attendees asked, if I am already proceeding in the interview process, a recruiter has reached out to me, should I still attempt to connect with somebody else from the company after I'm already like moving along, or should I just leave it at that point?
I think the main reason to reach out to someone is to get that interview. If you're already being reached out to, and this is something I want everyone to realize, if you get an interview or if someone's reaching out to you, they have already determined it's very, very likely that you are one of the most qualified applicants or that you're one of the most appealing applicants. I would say that your time is, if I'm you, I'm probably investing time in reaching out to other companies and making sure I don't have all the eggs in one basket. But I think if you know someone that you're really close with, then it might make sense. But if you don't know someone well, then I probably would leave it at that and invest your time elsewhere. Sam, I want to mention that the questions that don't get answered today, I'm actually going to be answering them this week on my Instagram. So I have my handle ready for you if you want me to show that. And I want to make sure that people can send those questions to me, and I'm going to answer them through video throughout the entire week. So I'm hoping to continue this conversation there.
Awesome. Yeah. If you want to bring that up on the page right now, and I will also include her Instagram in the follow-up email that goes out with the recording later today. But I want to say thank you so much, Lynn. We really appreciate your time. And I think we all learned a lot today.
Thank you so much for having me. The Fairygodboss audience has the best questions and they're the best to work with.
I mean, I have to agree. I might be biased though. Thank you everybody for taking the time out of your Monday, for being here today, and good luck with your job search. I know you're all going to land your dream job. Thanks. See you at the next one.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.